everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to be here today to interview two of our authors from the Changing Workbook, Leading with Compassion, Cultivating Connection from the Inside Out. My name is Rachel O'Mara, and I am a Changing Work member and volunteer hosting this particular panel as we kick things off, interviewing and speaking to the authors and learning more about who they are and how they contributed. A little bit about me. So I am a executive leadership coach, and I coach founders and entrepreneurs, executives on how to rise to their next level of leadership through emotional intelligence. And I also run a venture studio for a biotech startup and have my own coaching business on the side, Power of Pause. All right. Let's talk and just briefly introduce Sarah Ariado and Ashanti Branch. Hi, Sarah. Good to see you.
Hi, Rachel. Good to be here. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about what you do and what inspired you to write your chapter.
Yeah, so I've been in healthcare technology and healthcare in oncology for the past 20 years. I started off treating cancer patients, moved to administration, and then consulting in the health tech space. I recently left and started my own coaching company where I help organizations embrace the humanity of their employees to up-level their performance and engagement. I was called to write this chapter. I just love the changing work community and really share my experience of cultivating the empathy and the compassion that we have in the workplace to demonstrate what I'm coaching people about. So not only do I advocate for it, but I actually experienced it myself. And so just wanted to share that with the world.
Thank you. That's great. So good to have you here today. Ashanti, how about yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and what inspired you to write your chapter.
So I'm Ashanti Branch from Oakland, California. I'm a Changing Work volunteer in this project, but I'm the founder of the Ever Forward Club. I started the Ever Forward Club when I was a first year teacher. I left engineering to become a teacher, and that transition was not only, it was a heart call, definitely wasn't a financial decision, but it was definitely a eye-opening experience of like, what does it mean to live a life of purpose, right? As an engineer, I loved engineering and math, but and I was really loving the money. But when I became a teacher, it was definitely not a financial mobility decision. If you're talking about mobility being forward, but I ultimately realized that I love education, and education required us to have students. And so, during the journey of this 20 years of building the Ever Forward Club, I've mentored young men since then. So those men are now in their 30s, right? And I think the work of this chapter was about a story of a young man who's now an adult, and he was going through a tough time. And I think I got a chance to like be there for him, even though I was in the middle of a bunch of deadlines and timelines. And it's how do you take a moment and say, okay, what's the most important thing right now? And that's how the chapter came about. It was a real situation, but it's the constant work we do mentoring young men for the last 20 years.
I can't wait to get into that with you. So thank you. Thank you both for being here today. And I should add that this book is a collection of 25 authors. So we have Sarah and Ashanti here. There's 23 other individuals who contributed to this book to make it really an essential guide, I would say, for how to lead with compassion, because each person, each individual, like Sarah and you, Ashanti, have your point of view and perspective that you uniquely bring, which really brings this holistic view around many aspects and angles on how this can be and how it works in the workplace for anyone. So I think it's very exciting to be here and diving in detail more about what their chapters are about, as well as knowing this is a bigger effort, obviously, just than with the two of you, but really helping with what we stand for to change work and to help others understand things that might be different or could do differently in service to really helping the workplace be more effective, be more personalized, human, all of the good things that go along with that. So with that, I know, Sarah, your chapter is chapter 6, Humanizing the Workplace. And I know when I read it, it's a compelling story, knowing you're in healthcare, and I would love for, in your own words, to share really what is this story that you share in the book around this chapter.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. So many of us go into healthcare because we are called with our hearts, similar to Ashanti being a teacher, right? It's, sometimes it's financial decision, but most of the time it's because we care about people and we want to help others. And there's also a business aspect of healthcare or healthcare technology. And so oftentimes we hear leaders talk about they're either heart-centered or they're numbers-centered. And the reason that I chose this particular story to share was it really combines both. If you just focus on the people and you don't focus at all on the business, you need to show your data, right? You're still running a business. You need to be able to expand your team, provide the technologies that best serve patients, expand the research and the awareness. So there's definitely a financial and number-driven factor. But if you only focus on the numbers, with people specifically in healthcare, you're really going to lose that engagement and that heart-centered approach, the reason that those particular people went into this field. And so with my experience of having my team go through a traumatic event together, I actually had the blessing of seeing what a lot of leaders don't get to see, which is, you hear about the invisible workload, but this is really the invisible burden that we all carry that a lot of times leaders don't know we're going through. Leaders may have an employee who's sick or going through a divorce or caring for an aging parent, or, insert situation, and they aren't aware of it. And if they're not in tune or display that emotional intelligence, they're really not doing their employees a service by ignoring that piece of them, because people bring their problems to work. They bring their whole selves to work, whether they try to or not, whether they want to or not, because we're human. And like I said, it's a traumatic event, but I had the fortune of knowing what happened and being able to make sure that I was regulated and in a good space to be the leader that my team needed. I wasn't in my own head. I wasn't dealing with my own hidden burden. And therefore, I could really step up and support them, even when I got pushback from my leaders who were more the numbers driven people. And I was able to show that by stepping up and recognizing the humanity, my numbers still spoke. They were a more engaged team. They were more productive, and really ended up being a more collaborative and patient-focused team by having that support, because I demonstrated that it was safe and it was okay.
And not to reveal too much about your particular chapter 6, but I know it is in a hospital. So, right, it's actually a hospital where there's something that happens, and then you're on the ground there, prepared and doing what you need to do. So just from that background alone, knowing it is an institution, a facility, a hospital, my sense is those numbers and that data is like running the show, even while it's in that industry. And kudos to you for not just helping management and those who needed data to get it, but to actually embody what was most needed then to really manage the situation. And did you find resistance to that? Did you find that it was easier than you had anticipated? I'm curious, because I know when I think of hospitals, I think of, they are like well-run oiled machines, and there's a lot of components that go with it. And I think about if I don't make those numbers, it's like I have X amount of minutes and this and this and this has to happen. And can you just share a little bit about that from that perspective, and how compassion fueled this to persevere in your story over all of that?
Yeah, so that's a really good point, and thank you for the question. Yes, so healthcare, it does appear to be a well-oiled machine, and that's the goal for the patients to experience that. But like any organization in any field, there's the business aspect, and there's the learning curve. So what's different, and I would say most unique about hospitals or healthcare organizations is it's not just the business aspect where you have the numbers and the employees to care about, but your clients or patients, they're people that are sick. So not to diminish any other field, but if you don't purchase a book at a bookstore, or if you don't buy that car at a car dealership, no one's going to die, most likely, right? But in healthcare, if you don't have that well-oiled machine, and you don't have that team that is communicating and collaborating and has the technology that they need and the support to feel safe and report anything that may have not gone as planned, then you are risking someone's health or someone's life. So it's really exponential, I think, of any other industry. And so it's balancing that perception and safety of the patient with the business aspect. I think what some organizations get wrong, and what I was feeling some resistance on, is yes, let's put on a great face and safety for the patient, but what about the employees? And I think that sometimes leaders forget that if you don't take care of your employee, that's going to be a ripple effect for your patients. But if you take care of that employee and they feel safe and they're reporting, hey, this happened, it wasn't ideal, here's how I fixed it, or can I get some ideas and support on how to fix it and how to make it safe or how to make it better next time, you're going to have a much better patient experience, a much safer patient experience. And those employees are going to be committed to working together and doing the best that they can versus feeling like just a number, which it doesn't feel good in any industry, but especially when patients' lives are at the receiving end of that. And so to answer your question, was it easier or harder? I feel like I was in a bit of a state of shock, which I actually thrive under pressure. So I dove in and did what I needed to do. And from that standpoint, for me, it was easy. It was when leadership found out about the details of how I was supporting my team outside of the typical scope, that they then were really hammering on the numbers and focusing on what is this going to mean for the bottom line. And luckily, I was able to show that it
So important.
improved the bottom line, but it was unfortunate that that was their first reaction to the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that, because it was certainly sounds like a lot to handle. And knowing compassion is putting yourself in other people's shoes. Like, what would that person do? Or that person, it sounds like, as a leader, that was really at the forefront for you as you were supporting everybody through that period. So it's just hats off to you. And I'm glad that you persevered and were able to succeed in that way.
Thank
Awesome.
you. Thank you. One thing
Ashanti.
to add,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
sorry, Rachel. One thing to add about that, I don't think anyone really, as a leader or as an employee, intends to ignore the humanity of it and tries to dismiss the humanity. I think organizations and leaders just aren't necessarily trained in how to balance that. You know, we're trained on how to read the spreadsheets and how to look at the numbers, but we're not necessarily trained on how to deal with what the underlying burden is. And so, you know, just to acknowledge my leader, even though she was very number centric and gave me resistance, I don't think her intent was to be at the detriment of the team. I think it was really what she knew and what she excelled in that she was trying to focus on. But it's just the appearance of how that can relate to folks. So just to make that differentiation of, I don't think any leaders are trying to be bad leaders or incompassionate leaders. I think it's just the education and the experience and support themselves.
100% agree with that too, right? We're all doing the best that we can. I love that thought. All right, let's go to you, Ashanti. I would love to learn, why did you write this chapter? Tell us a little bit about what this contains regarding the theme we're all with and compassion.
Yeah, and I realized that in the intro, instead of talking about why I chose to be a part of this project, I talked about some of the work, because I think deep down, not only the work that I get to do is deeply like me. It's hard to separate where the Ever Forward Club starts, Ashanti ends, and mixture in between. And so when I had the opportunity, I've been thinking about writing a book for lots of years. I wasn't want to say the number, many, many years.
Years.
And I
Yes.
have it in my journals. I have it in my what is it called? My morning pages, too many times to name. And I just kept getting stuck. Kept getting stuck. When this opportunity came to be a part of a collaborative book, I was like, all right, one chapter. Okay, I can get one chapter out. I mean, every time I sit down trying to write a book, I always think, how am I going to write a book? But it is just writing one chapter at a time. And I think this process was felt like not only collaboratively, you had a team, you had a pod. I mean, it was so well done that it helped me to like break through some of the barriers that I don't even know where I can't even name all the barriers. I just know that there was a block. And I think deep down why it's connected to this chapter is because this work is personal for me. Like, um, Sarah, when you talked about like the idea of like leaders, I also name it in terms of teachers, right? Teachers are taught to teach a subject. I was a teacher. I was a math teacher. I love math. I had many students come to my class didn't like math. Now, my story is not about teaching math, but it's connected because this work began as a math teacher who was failing. Like I love math, and I got smart kids failing my class. That's get personal. I felt like I was doing something wrong, and so long story shorter is I recognized that I needed to do something different than what the classroom teaching was done. My job assignment was to come in, teach math, grade papers, give grades. That's my job. Like they'll ask you, do you like kids when you interview for a teaching job? But I mean, anybody's gonna say, yes, of course I love kids. But I've been in many classrooms of teachers who don't act like they love kids. So I think that I had to pass a test to make sure that I knew my math. That was clear. I didn't take a test about how much I care about kids, how much I care about kids' well-being, how much I care about how kids are feeling. Because it's actually, you don't even have the time to talk about that in the curriculum. There's no questions in the curriculum. How do you feel? It's Pythagorean theorem, quadratic formula, graphing a line. Like that was the work. So
It's
that's
very
the
cut and
background.
dry. Yeah. Yeah. And I know I realized I hadn't said the chapter and the name and number. So do you want to just share what your chapter name is as well?
Yeah, it's a mouthful, right? The title is long. I'm in chapter 17, and the chapter is called Following the Call, a story of priorities, presence, and heartfelt choices. And when it says following the call, it's different. It's actually about a phone call that I'm having on a plane on my way back home when I needed to be working on this project and but this phone call caused me to be like in the middle of this flight in a text conversation back and forth with a young man. And I
Yeah.
think deep down the work, because it's so personal, it is part of the work. It's not a job. Like it's like when a young man texts me, like I had a call this morning randomly from a young man who I met at a camp a couple of years ago. He was struggling. He was going through it. He was coming up his own barriers, and he called me today with an update about how life is going for him. Like, and that was remarkable, right? Those little moments along the journey have helped me to stay in the game. And it was not only following that phone call that happened in the story, it was following the call of my heart. Like when I got the call to become a teacher, like I was an engineer. I was raised by a single mother in Oakland, California, growing up with poor on welfare. I'm talking about old school welfare, like monopoly money food stamps, like old, like I'm talking about that kind of and I thought if I could not live like that, I would do it. I was good at math. I went to school to be an engineer. And when teaching called me, I was like, you got the wrong house. I don't know where this calling is coming from, but it's not for me because teachers can't live where I'm living right now. I'm living in this fancy city. Like there's this condo. A teacher can't live here. You know what I'm saying? I can't. And I realized my mom was a teacher, so I knew how broke financially teachers were. I knew how hard she worked. And I was like, that's not for me. So the calling, following the call, was deeply a story about this phone call that turned into a text message on a plane, but it was deeper than that. It was about following the call of your heart. How do you, if you're in a profession that's making you all kind of money and acclaim and prestige, how do you walk away from that to go do something that your heart says this would make you feel not financially more alive or free, but fully more alive and free? And I think that it was a hard call to answer. If you're answering your heart, it's easy. but because your head and heart are connected, like, how am I gonna pay my bills? Why would I choose to be poor? Why would I choose to be in a profession where I get blamed for the reason kids don't pass classes when I love my job and I want them to learn? And I think that that's has been a big challenge on this journey of education. But looking back over this 20 years has been really beautiful. So that's how the chapter came about.
Yeah, thank you for sharing about your experience with the writing and why you felt called in the call to show up and choose with your heart and also your mind, but to show up, as you say. And it's just beautiful. And Sarah, for you, can you share a little bit about the writing process? Why, like, how did it go for you as you wrote your chapter, knowing this was something that you felt compelled to get on paper?
Yeah, thank you. The writing process was not what I expected, and not in a good or a bad way. I don't really know what I had expected. Um, but it's funny, Ashanti, that you talk about calling to your heart, because that was a lot of what we were instructed to do when choosing our chapter, is let it speak from your heart. And so I was going back and forth about a couple of chapters, but this one just kept resurfacing. And I still can't put my finger on why, but I think it's because of the invisible burden that everybody is dealing with. And kind of to tie into what Ashanti said, when we do things that we're called to do, when we do things that come from our heart as an employee, as a leader, as a person in life, it flows. We are productive. We're willing to go the extra step, the extra mile, to dive in, to pitch in, to do what we need to do to get it done and get it right, because it feels like a part of us. But when we're misaligned, it's really, really hard, really hard. Even if it's 2 + 2, it's like, oh my gosh, I have to write this again. So I think it was just calling out what is often left unspoken or maybe even ignored, which is we all have a piece of us that comes wherever we go, but isn't addressed. And again, I think it's that invisible burden of, caring for a loved one, or um, dealing with our own illness or stress or whatever it is, and how it impacts work. And if it's not addressed, it really is at the detriment to everyone. And for me, my heart is patience. Even though now I'm working with organizations and I'm not patient facing, my clients still are patient facing, or they deal with people who are patient facing. And so at the end of the day, I'm always thinking about that person who just wants the best care, and the people that I work with who want to give it to them. But how do we bridge that gap to make sure that their humanity leads into the best care possible for that person? And so really, I think I was called to it. That seems to be the theme of this call, but I was
We're all
called to it
called,
just
yeah.
to address that humanity and address what organizations are trying to do, but don't necessarily have the right information or support to do. And that's why I'm happy to be coaching and to bridge that gap for them.
Yeah, and what I'm getting from both of you is when you bring your heart in, and when you are aware of the call, not just the math and the head and the training we all have, the intellect, you are a stronger leader. You are showing up in ways that aren't just benefiting you because you are aligned, but man, your whole world is more or less uh stronger in that sense of you showing up for you, which allows other people to show up. And then there's just this ripple effect in it, and it's amplified, I think, in that way. And Sarah, in your book, I want to cite just a quote towards the end of your chapter, and I wanted you to just comment on it because it really resonated with me as one of the lessons and takeaways. And I think it's kind of a great way to wrap up what you're talking about. Leading with compassion doesn't just improve engagement, it empowers teams, fosters connection, and builds a culture where everyone can thrive. It's not about numbers on a page, it's about the lives we touch along the way. So good. And anything to add to that, or just what that means in that sense? And I think this is really the crux of what we're talking about today. It's not just about like I guess I couldn't say it better than you. Right there.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, really nothing to add. I do feel like that sums it up from my heart to the world, that if we if we just pay attention to the people that we're working with, it always works out. It really does always work out.
Yeah, and I'm going to move into what Ashanti's theme is too, where you're answering the call and you talk about trusting yourself. Like how do you trust yourself to get what needs to be done, but also show up big, show up for you and anyone else because they matter and you matter, right? So your passage that really struck me was the part about what I was just sharing, where you're saying, it's important to trust yourself and know that it's not just about the work that you do, but in the way we show up for others when they need us most. And sometimes the most profound stories aren't the ones that we write or the ones we write, they're the ones we live. And that's kind of how you ended your chapter. So anything else to add to that? Any other thoughts that you have when you hear that? Oh, you're on mute.
Like that, like that. One of the things I was thinking about when I was writing it, but also, when I left engineering, when I was in engineering as a project engineer, as a project manager out in the field on construction projects, 60, 70 hours a week was average, was average, right? Maybe people knew how to do it better, but I was in the thick of it, right? When I became a teacher, it was like like the school ends at 3:30, and technically maybe in some contract it says you can leave at 3:45, or but I was always there till almost dark, right? I was like grading papers, preparing lessons, like all the things that have to go into education. And I'm like, I'm working so much harder and getting paid two-thirds less. This doesn't make any sense in consciousness. But I'm clear that because I came from an industry where working like that was normal, it was exactly what I needed to do. Like if I did the math as a math teacher, it's the worst thing to do is average out what your hourly wages
Right,
are.
right. Don't want to do that.
And most people think that as a teacher, you get paid to get summers off because they don't understand. They don't know that you don't get paid for the summer. They think they know, but they don't know. And the sad part is that they make these judgments of like, you should be happy. You get summers off. And you're like, yeah, but, there's no check coming in the summer. Like, I got to figure out how to supplement. And so I think that the journey of becoming an educator has had me to really get clear about heart. Like, if I am going to follow a passion of the work that I feel I was called to do, what if that calling doesn't seem in the society's way of like adding value? So, I mean, like if teachers don't get paid, so does that mean teachers are not valued? Well, people say teachers are valued, but the way that we compensate teachers, which is how you survive in this world we live in, that is an economy based on dollars and cents, how do you live if my work is valued? And I think that it is important, right? As a teacher who came from an industry, from engineering, where you get paid really well, to come into a profession where you don't, you can feel it. You can feel it in the morale. You can feel it in the community. You can feel it in how people. You can see people when the bell ring, they're in the parking lot faster than the students. You're like, how'd you get to your car that fast? Like, did you just time warp from your like your did you lock up your classroom, right? How did you do this, right? I think sometimes this idea that we are expecting so much in an industry, so you're in the health industry. I said, what if teachers could just teach one student at a time? What if I had just one student at a time and I got to do it like that? Now I'm not comparing the industries in any way, except to say, like, I would wonder, like, teachers, doctors get paid in medical profession, they get paid well. I've always thought about that. I can't handle, that's not my industry. I can't, I'm a little squirmish, you know what I'm saying? I'm a squirmish person, right? But I think about like, well, we expect teachers to diagnose 30 students at a time. We expect them to like navigate that room and make sure every student get the individual plan that's going to help them with their best life in that class. And I think that's so hard to do. It's so hard to do. It's what we have to do. But most schools look like they did 100 years ago. Go into a classroom, there's a desk in a row, there's a board in the front. Maybe it's a whiteboard, maybe it's an electric board, but it's still a board. And I am convinced that education called me for a reason, not just so that I could put myself in a financial challenge, but so that I could say, what would life look like if we could make education move up to the 21st century? how do we make sure that education can grow and people can grow and teachers can go into their job and feel like I'm okay, I'm doing good, I'm taking care of my family, I'm taking care of my bills, I'm not stressed that I'm doing all this work and not really being compensated well. And when I'm talking about all these topics because it's connected to this idea that when I was on that flight home, that phone call came in right before the flight. I'm realizing I have a young person in need. Um, I had a plan on this flight to do some other work, and it's like, okay, how do you choose? How do you choose the career over the financial safety? You shouldn't have to, but what happens if you do? And I think our hearts sometimes are calling us to make a difference in the world. And I think we want to feel that we're making a difference. I wanted to feel like I made a difference. And I knew that on that call, that during those text messages back and forth on that plane, I was just hoping that I could provide some support for that young person. And I'm thankful that I was the one called. I
You was
think,
your teacher in a moment. Yes, that's
yeah,
awesome.
absolutely.
Very lovely connections there across the board for all of that. And I think what I'm getting from both of you here, and we'll open it up to talk about each other's chapters if you have any thoughts and insights there, is that even if you just listen to your heart, even allow it just to kind of be around, hanging out, there might be a message or two to pick up that maybe you would have otherwise not gotten, or helps in service towards whatever it is that you are working on or doing. And I think the takeaway for me from this conversation is leading with compassion is listen, as though like just checking in and listening a little bit. I don't know if it means I act right away. I don't know if it means that I have to change up everything I do, but heck, if I can just listen about what is happening in my body and in my heart, then chances are I'm going to be a better leader. So I love that. Thank you both for helping me get that for myself too. What about, lastly, just any thoughts you have? I know we've all read the book, and for those who are wondering where to find it, by the way, it's on changingwork.org. It is published February 14th, 2025. You can go under the heading of media and find it. We've got 25 authors in there. Sarah, Ashanti, any questions or comments, thoughts around your respective chapters to each other?
Yeah, so before we started this formality of the call, I was sharing with Ashanti that I loved his chapter and it just really spoke to my heart. And I think the common thread of not only this call, but also of changing work is exactly what you just said, Rachel, which is if we just stop and listen. You know, Ashanti's chapter, what spoke to me is I felt like the details of the story were different, but I felt like it was my story where I've been faced with a morality decision, or productive decision is not necessarily the right word. Maybe it's like from the heart, or a morality versus a career, or a to do, a should that needs to get done. And I feel like we're faced with that every day, and just how you did tune in to listen, and then you made that choice based on your heart and what you knew mattered most, right? And you talked a bit about, you know, financial compensation and different things. There was no financial compensation for you in that moment for what you chose, but you listened to your heart, and what you gave that person and the world, I don't think can be measured in finance, or really even in metrics. I think it's immeasurable. And I think that I would like to believe that humanity, we have those opportunities every day. And the more we foster them as individuals, as leaders, the more it's going to ripple throughout the world. So I loved, it spoke to me. So I just loved reading that chapter and was so pleased that we were partnered here.
Yeah, me too, Sarah. One of the things that when you even described your chapter, this idea of that the world that we don't understand, we could make judgments about that are not clear, that are not accurate. And in the medical profession, as a person who tries to avoid going to the doctor, probably not the best intelligent move to make, but it's real. And how we know that in our work with young men we're often trying to get them to go get your regular checkups. Okay, go like preventative work, right? And when you are in a hospital, which I can imagine has lots of chaotic, traumatic situations, tough situations, I'm always in awe of people who can stay calm under that. Because you said you're calm under pressure. I think I can. I don't think I would say I am. I think, as a teacher, when stuff is happening, you have to like, okay, there's a fight, there's a big fight. Like you have to stay calm. But in my mind, I feel like I'm running. Like I feel like I'm right. I'm like, stay calm. Don't let them know you're freaking out, Ashanti, because you're gonna make them freak out. But I think if you ask me, do you stay calm under pressure? I say, no, I'm pretty intense. And maybe you can be intense and calm. I don't know, but I want to just thank you for the words you put into action so people can see it. Because I think most times people don't know what's happening behind the walls, right? When they come in the doors, they get tunnel vision about what they're going through, what they need, and what their family needs. And sometimes hard to see that, well, that person is also helping people in room A, 2, 4, 4, they're helping other people around too, right? So there's multiple things happening at the same time. And as a person who loves numbers, who loves data, who understands numbers and data, it is hard sometimes to go past the data. So thank you for putting it into like a real situation that, oh, if I got a kid who's failing a class, that's numbers. But if I'm not recognizing that that kid comes to school tired, hungry, stressed out, worried, stressed, traumatically dealing with life, I could totally miss that he's brilliant and smart. He's just not able to translate it to numbers on a page because there's too much stuff in the way. And I think that thank you for putting some humanity to some time a profession that doesn't always um, and over the last several years, we can say that has gotten blamed for things that they shouldn't have been blamed for. But that's the world we live in, so we have to navigate. And I thank you. Thank you for the work you put into it.
Thank you both for sharing valuable insights that gleaned from just one chapter in the book. Imagine reading 25, right? There's so much there. In conclusion, I think we can it's safe to say leading with compassion is additive. That's kind of the big takeaway as well for me. And thank you both again for your contributions. I'm curious, where can we find you? Where can we learn more about your world so that people can find you outside the book? Sarah?
Yes, thank you. So my website, sarahariado.com, SarahAriaudo.com. I've got the hardest last name to remember. Or Breathe with Sarah might be easier. Happy to help organizations and individuals just up-level their leadership and embrace humanity so that we can make this world a better place.
Great. And how about you, Ashanti?
I'm the founder of the Ever Forward Club, so you can find us at Ever Forward Club on all platforms or everforwardclub.org. And our global movement, the Million Mask Movement, is millionmask.org. And I'm Ashanti Branch. So glad to be here with you.
So grateful to be with both of you today. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for your contributions, and for helping us be more compassionate leaders.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel.